Howdy folks! I've been meaning to do some videos about my pizza oven. Coincidentally, it's 1 year since I baked the first pizzas in it, so it's the first year birthday. I'm really happy with the way that it came out. I've gotten a lot of use out of it. So far I've baked 142 pizzas, at least 43 loaves of bread, various cobblers and desserts, baked potatoes, all sorts of stuff. So we've gotten a lot of use out of it. It's been a great success. But anyways, I went through a whole process of coming up with the design and stealing bits and pieces here and there. I had a series of criteria. I wanted it to be relatively inexpensive, so it had to be a DIY sort of project. I wanted something a little bit smaller that wasn't a big monstrosity in the yard, especially if it didn't work out. That being said, maybe even something temporary that I could move or take apart, but that didn't happen. Also, since it would be a DIY project, something relatively simple, something that wouldn't take me forever to build or didn't require a lot of masonry skills, because I have absolutely zero experience with masonry stuff. And so anyways, the first thing I considered was one of these earth mound dome sort of ovens made out of clay and straw, and that would have fit the bill fine as far as usability. The problem is, when I read about them, I guess they're not weatherproof. Being made out of earth and clay, they have a tendency to melt. They also have a tendency to crack, so they don't last forever. They're inexpensive, but they still require quite a bit of work to build, and I didn't want to do that every so many years down the road to have to rebuild my oven. So I kind of leaned against that. Nor did I want to put a roof over it too to keep the elements off, which would have made it into a much larger structure. The second thing I considered, and was probably a really good option, is I saw some dry fit brick ovens, where dry fit means it's not mortared. They're just bricks that are stacked in the shape of an oven, and they use angle iron to support the bricks going across the flat top. And I saw some videos, and they were really very effective. The only negative was that I wanted something that I could do some baking, and the more I read of other things too besides pizzas, and the more that I read, the more I realized the importance of insulating the oven, and even a dry fit oven. And the trouble is, once you add insulation, the oven becomes much less temporary and a little bit more complicated. So once it's insulated, you have to weatherproof it to keep water out of the insulation, and do maybe a stucco coating, which can crack, or put a roof over it, and things like that. So that was becoming a lot more difficult. And if you're going to spend that much time, you might as well do something that's a little bit more permanent and right from the get-go. The other option was to build a full-blown traditional oven, and you see some pictures of these things, and they're just beautiful, and I would love to have one. But by the time you get through all the materials, it would be kind of expensive, and it's way beyond the amount of time that I have, and also my skill level. Because they usually have a arched roof or a domed roof, and they're made out of bricks that are cut to special angles and fit, and it's just way beyond my skill level and patience and everything else. So I didn't want to do something of that nature. So this is what I ended up with. It's basically, what I call it, is a two-walled brick wood-fired oven. And basically there's a number of parts to it, but it has a firebox on the inside that's kind of a standalone separate structure, and it's made out of, you need to make it out of fire brick. And I used this clay brick that's heat resistant, and this is from an old 1872 chimney that somebody was taking down. So I got that fairly inexpensive. And you can see that's these three bricks here, and makes a chamber on the inside that has a flat roof, and the roof is supported with angle iron. And the angle iron should last a good long time. I did some research into that, and I'm sure it'll still be supporting the roof after I'm dead. So that's fine. But anyways, so there's a separate chamber, and then this brick on the outside. This is actually factory-made modern cement brick that forms another wall. So basically, there's two structures with a space between it, and that space is filled with insulation. So I got the oven, I got it insulated. I removed any difficulty as far as having an arched roof. It's pretty small and not too intrusive into the yard. Some of the dimensions, it is small for a typical wood-fired pizza type oven. The base is 4 foot by 4 foot, and the inside dimensions of the inner chamber is, I think it's 27 inches deep by about 28.5 inches wide. So it's not huge, but it's enough for me to make a couple pizzas. For a while I was pushing the coals to one side and I could get one pizza in on the side, but now I push them to the back and I'm able to do two pizzas side by side, so I can crank out the pizzas pretty quick. Or also just load it up with bread or whatever. The doorway is about 8 inches high and 16 inches across, and the inside chamber is 11 inches high. And a lot of the design stuff I just followed kind of the typical wood-fired oven, mostly pizza ovens, so this kind of came out more like a pizza oven. But I didn't invent anything. This is all stolen from other rules of thumb and whatnot. But the inside of the chamber is 11 inches high, and that's supposed to be taller than the door. The door is supposed to be shorter. And the rule of thumb is to have it about the door about 66% of the total height. And this is 8 inches, the inside somewhere around 11. It came out to be about a 70% ratio, which is not as high as they would like, but it works fine. The chimney's in the front, which is kind of counterintuitive. I always thought that the chimney should be towards the back and you have airflow out, but actually this works great. You have cold air that flows in the door in the bottom. It hits the hot coals and feeds the fire. It's the flame and the air go up to the top of the roof and they roll off the roof, and then they come back forward and come towards the door, and then they go out the roof here. So, or the chimney. So it works really well. So other than that, I'm going to have another video with the actual construction and more details on the materials. But kind of what I came up with here seemed to work really well. It was really not too expensive to build. A lot of the materials I had on hand or could get fairly cheap. I didn't have to have a separate roof on it. This is actually a wood frame to form this roof, and I had all the wood from a leftover barn that I disassembled. So all the framing and the sheathing I had, and it just sits on top of this outer wall. So there's actually insulation on top of the fire chamber, and there's actually an airspace. So actually the outside of the oven doesn't get hot at all after I fire it. It stays cool, other than if it's sitting in the sun. But as far as from the fire, it stays nice and cool on the walls and on the roof. And so everything's pretty compact. It's weatherproof. I have a door that fits on the outside here. Let me grab that. Actually, I have two doors. This is actually a metal door with cement board on the inside. And it's to keep the heat in. But then I also have just an outer door just to keep the weather and water out from the rain. And I also have a cap that I put over the chimney just to keep water from it. So I don't have to put tarps over it. It's weatherproof, and I'm very happy with it. So a couple of things I would change, but I can go over that later in some other videos. So if you want to see more about the construction, take a look at my videos. I should have a video on how it's constructed and more details on the material used. But anyways, it's been a year. It's held up well. It was still took a lot of work to build, but a lot simpler than some of the other options out there. So I'm really happy with it. Well, thanks for looking at the video. Check out the one on the construction, and happy pizza baking and happy birthday.